Cloud native just means you've got more components or microservices than anyone, even a mythical TEDx engineer, can keep track of. With Ops Level, you can build a catalog in minutes and forget needing that mythical 10x engineer. Now, you'll have a 10x service catalog to accompany your 10x service count. Visit opslevel.com to learn how easy it is to build and manage your service catalog. Connect to your Git provider and you're off to the races with service import, repo ownership, tech docs, and more. A friend who happens to work at AWS recently had reason to send me about 500 gigabytes of data. This friend is a business user. Now, say what you want about AWS's hiring practices, they certainly don't hire people who aren't intelligent. This intelligent person made the very reasonable determination that the best solution that they had to send me that half terabyte of data was to mail me a hard drive. I want to digress here for a second to point out just how brutal a condemnation this is of S3's usability for non-technical users. There is no reason in the world that my, again, intelligent friend should have had to do this. Given the sheer scope and scale of S3, it feels definitively like the service has succeeded in spite of its user interfaces rather than because of them. Anywho, there I was a week and a half later with a half terabyte of data that I wanted to get into S3 myself. The day may well come when an AWS employee is able to be more ridiculous than I, but that day was not this day. Noting that some of my AWS credits were soon to expire, I ordered myself a Snowball Edge. The date was December 22nd, 2022. For those who haven't heard of this service before, let me begin by imploring you to look neither of the words in the name Snowball Edge up in the Urban Dictionary. The AWS service namer certainly didn't. It's a box that's just shy of 50 pounds, 22.54 kilograms, that's stuffed full of, computer parts. Originally, this was used to send data into and begrudgingly out of AWS. Later, someone figured out that you could stuff additional computer parts besides hard drives into these things and also run EC2 instances on them. That box is heavily ruggedized, explosion resistant in case your workloads are far more perilous than mine, and they can run completely detached from the internet or other AWS regions for indefinite periods of time. Okay, so why is this stupendous overkill? Because I can stuff half a terabyte into S3 in roughly an hour over my home internet connection, but even if I couldn't, the much smaller snow cone fits on my desk, holds 30 times as much data as the Snowball Edge monstrosity, and would have been the correct choice. I created a Snowball Edge job in the AWS console. Since I was going to be doing something unpleasant, it only made sense for me to do this in the land renowned for being itself unpleasant, Ohio. Sure enough, I configured the job, and within a day or so, the box was being shipped to me via UPS 2-day shipping. I could have opted for 1-day shipping, but in addition to the $300 per job fee, the customer also has to pay shipping both ways. Much like American healthcare or indeed the AWS bill itself, you only find out how much it costs you after the fact. Extra days would cost me $30 a day after the included initial 10 days, and just to prove a philosophical point, had I been using the Snowball to egress data from AWS, it would also have cost me an additional $1.50 in data transfer out charges for these 500 gigabytes. Soon enough, it was December 27th, and I will give some leeway in shipping times due to the holiday rush, and a rather puzzled-looking UPS driver dropped off the Snowball Edge. I immediately booted it up on the dining room table just in time for my wife to walk in and wonder why the hell she puts up with me. Lands of the late 90s and early 2000s were a magical place to learn about computers, hang out with your friends, and do cool stuff like share files, run websites and game servers, and occasionally bring the whole thing down with some ill-conceived software or network configuration. That's not how things are done anymore. But what if we could have a 90s-style LAN experience along with the best parts of the 21st century internet, most of which are very hard to find these days? Tailscale thinks we can, and I'm inclined to agree. With Tailscale, I can use trusted identity providers like Google or Okta or GitHub to authenticate users and automatically generate and rotate keys to authenticate devices I've added to my network. I can then share access to those devices with friends and teammates or tag devices to give my team broader access, and that's the magic of it. Your data is protected by the simple yet powerful social dynamics of small groups that you trust. Try now. It's free forever for personal use. I've been using it for almost 2 years personally and am moderately annoyed that they haven't attempted to charge me for what has become an absolutely essential to my workflow service. Once I had the device here, I wanted to play with it a bit more. I began the process of getting an AMI onto the thing to run an instance, but a careful reading of the docs indicated that I would potentially be paying an extra $200 the minute I spun up an instance on the thing that was already sitting here, so I opted not to do that. That said, the process of adding an AMI to a Snowball that's already in your possession is freaking wild. It's a bunch of steps. No reference AMIs have been conveniently exported for your use, and the entire process feels like you've somehow wandered into the land of the corporate IT admins who are used to playing these games. Personally, I backed away slowly. One other frustrating part is when I found myself sitting at my dining room table with a USB hard drive, staring at a bunch of USB ports on the back of the Snowball Edge, but I could not, for love or money, get them to do anything. Apparently, this is not how it works when the cloud comes to invade your home, and instead I had to toss it onto the network and then either use an S3 endpoint or NFS. S3 seemed to make a lot of sense, right? It's how things work in cloud. The process of getting specific IAM for the credentials for the device was reasonably straightforward, but I snapped when I realized that the AWS CLI has no global understanding of use this local endpoint instead of an AWS region. So instead, you have to pass that information to every CLI command that you use rather than stuffing a config option into your local AWS config for the Snowball's profile. This throws a wrench into not just data transfer jobs with Snow family devices, but also into a whole bunch of use my local S3-alike services instead use cases. At least I know now why most of those services have custom tooling rather than simply relying on the AWS provided options. Ugh. AWS wasn't quite done having fun at my expense yet. On January 1st, I got an email telling me that there had been a delay in importing my data into S3. This completed on January 3rd, at which point AWS billed me for the job. In addition to the $300 job fee, the least expensive shipping option had cost me another $173.60 round trip. And as the cherry on top of all of this, because the job doesn't bill until after it's completed, my credits expired on December 31st, and I got soaked for the actual costs of this ridiculous misadventure myself.